Recording in progress.
Amazing. Yeah.
I now call the March 15, 2023 Joint Special Business and Industry Commission, Green Vernon Commission meeting, and Special Business and Industry Commission meetings to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes, for the Business and Industry Commission, we have Chair Saktava,
Here.
Vice Chair Morfin.
Here.
Commissioner Brown. Here. Commissioner Condon.
Here.
Commissioner Williams.
Here.
You have a quorum. Commissioners Klein and Larios are not present. For the Green Vernon Commission, we have Chair Morfin.
Here.
Commissioner Brown. Here. Commissioner Bustamante. Here. Commissioner Perez
Here.
and Commissioner Stossel.
Here.
Commissioners, or Vice Chair Dare and Commissioner Edry are not present. You have a quorum for both bodies.
Madam City Clerk, do we have any changes to either of the agendas?
There are none.
May I have a motion to approve the agendas?
Commissioner Brown makes a motion to approve the agenda as is.
And is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Brown, seconded by Commissioner Perez to approve both agendas for the Joint Special Business and Industry Commission and Green Vernon Commission meeting and the Special Business and Industry Commission meeting. I'll call the roll. Chair Saktava,
Yes.
Chair
here.
Morfin,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner Condon,
Yes.
Commissioner Stossel,
Aye.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Commissioner Bustamante.
Aye.
Motion carries.
We will now take public comments for both the Business and Industry Commission and Green Vernon Commission. If you would like to provide public comment, please come to the podium or click the raise hand button in Zoom. Please state your name and business affiliation, if any, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
We have no raised hands on Zoom.
I think we can go on to the next item.
Sure. We will now, okay.
So we're recessing the Special Business and Industry Commission to consider the joint Special Business and Industry and GVC item.
Okay, yes.
So item number 1 is presentation of Integrated Resource Plan Survey and upcoming outreach efforts. Public Utilities Integrated Resources Manager Rafdin will present the item.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair and members of the commissions. My name is Ramzi Rafdin, Integrated Resource Manager. Item before you today is an informational report for the Integrated Resource Plan, also known as IRP, and the survey and stakeholder outreach. If I may direct your attention to the screen. The purpose of an IRP document is to describe how utilities plan to meet their energy and capacity resource needs. policy goals, physical and operational constraints, and other utility priorities. The city's 2024 IRP will provide a 20-year blueprint ensuring reliable and environmentally responsible energy at a competitive and affordable rate. Publicly owned utilities that exceed 700 gigawatts of retail sales must submit an IRP that will need to be updated every 5 years and must meet various requirements set by California Public Utilities Code, such as the energy storage, transportation, electrification, portfolio diversification, and meet the state mandated policies and regulations, including greenhouse gas emission reduction, renewable energy procurement, and facilitate a stakeholder engagement process. Here are some legislative goals IRP must address. These goals, set by the state regulators, need to be taken into consideration while planning the IRP. Senate Bill 350 requires emission reduction of 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. SB 100 requires 60% of retail load be served by clean energy in 2030 and 100% by 2045. Last year, SB 1020 was signed into law and requires 90% renewable by 2035 and 95% by 2040. IRP must address these policy goals set by the state regulators that are taken into consideration while planning. Presented here is the current Vernon electric utility resource mix based on the capacity. Note, our largest generating resource is the MGS natural gas plant and is able to serve 70% of our local load in an emergency. The solar resources that are depicted here are only available during solar hours and contain 2 new projects that were approved by Council starting 2024 and 2026. These 2 new projects together will include approximately 50 megawatts of battery storage. Palo Verde Nuclear Power Plant and a Hoover Dam hydro are considered zero emitting resources and are not renewable. MGS is needed to provide local reliability to our customers. The last 2 summers, California has experienced heat waves, and California Power Grid was strained to the point where California ISO declared a power emergency. Vernon, along with other POUs, was asked to provide every single megawatt of energy they could generate to avoid the outage. In this graph, the red line depicts forecasted electric load for the next 20 years. The blue line represents California Energy Commission's renewable energy requirements, also known as RPS, Renewable Portfolio Standard. The current VPU renewable capacity is represented in green and estimated shortfall in yellow. Estimated shortfall can be procured with long-term renewable projects and with market purchases. VPU submitted the last IRP in 2018, and we are in the process of developing the 2024 IRP. VPU wants and values input from its residents, businesses, and other community members, such as the Green Commission, the Business Industry Commission, and the Vernon City Council. VPU has prepared an electric survey to provide guidance in this planning process. The survey will be in a user-friendly form and will be asking for opinions and not technical questions. The survey contains 12 questions at this time. Vernon community will be able to access the electronic survey online starting tomorrow with a link displayed. The IRP electronic survey can also be accessed through the city website. All VPU residential and commercial customers will be notified by mail with a QR code that will access the survey. VPU will also send out an email with a survey link to its customers, Chamber, Business and Industry Commission, the Green Commission, and City Council. VPU would like to reach out as many customers as possible by partnering with Chamber, Business Industry Commission, the Green Vernon Commission, and City Council. Here's the estimated timeline for the IRP and stakeholder process. Today's meeting is the announcement of the IRP and first community engagement. The survey will be made available starting tomorrow. And in May, VPU team plans to present the survey results to both Vernon Green Commission and Business Industry Commission for thoughts and input. And in June, these results will be converted to scenarios that VPU expects to use as input for its production cost model. VPU team estimates to present the final IRP to Council in September and submit CPUC review in October. As I discussed, IRP is a 20-year blueprint for VPU to plan for capacity and energy needs. VPU must comply with the state policy guidelines to address operational constraints, greenhouse gas emission targets. Vernon Health and Environmental Control is also embarking on its environmental sustainability plan at this time. Therefore, we encourage electric utility customers to participate in both surveys, as these are very different state regulations that each department need to comply. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any IRP questions you may have. Please visit this address to learn more about the 2024 IRP process and click on the link to take the survey. Thank you.
Are there any questions for staff? Go ahead.
Can we get a copy of the 2018 IRP to review?
Absolutely, I can get it sent over to you. It's also available online on our website that I previously showed you, the IRP 2024, this link over here.
Right.
If you click on it, the previous IRP is available as well, but we can also make one available to you.
Yeah, go ahead.
How many surveys do you estimate you will need?
So the survey is open to everyone who can take as much as possible. It's an online survey done through SurveyMonkey. We will compile the data afterwards. The community, we are planning on having 3 community engagements with the Business Industry Commission as well as the Green Vernon Commission. That'll help us also get input from businesses as well as your community. And then we also reach out to other businesses through the email system that we mentioned earlier.
But you don't have like a number, say 50 or 1,500. You don't have a range of survey number?
We would like everyone to participate as much as possible. We would like to, if it's possible, the entire city to participate in the survey. But in the past, we have noticed we only get like 100 questions answered.
Thank you.
How do you go about contacting?
Excuse me, Commissioner, please speak into the microphone.
Oh, sorry. That's okay. I was just curious as to how you mentioned you had 100 responses to the last survey or so. How do you go about, advertising to the community that the survey is available and you like them to take it? I mean, is there like an email list where, Anthony can, or someone can email all the users in Vernon and then they all have it? I was curious as to how we contact the community.
Yeah, so Commissioner, the three things we're hoping to do is make the survey available online in the city website, through the city website. The second thing is we'll send out an email to, like you mentioned, to all the billing addresses that we probably have and reach out to all those customers, as well as through the Green Commission, as well as Business Industry Commission, as well as the Chamber. We'll reach out to them and provide them the information how to go about taking the survey.
That's great.
I've got a question for you. The stakeholder group, I would imagine, and I would posit to you, is larger than the Vernon community. The capital markets that are looking to come into Vernon should have an opportunity to be able to know what it is that you want to do, how you want to do it, what information they can provide to you through their answers to the surveys. They're not a part of the stakeholder group. They're a secondary market and a tertiary market, but they have as much or more impact in their answers because they're looking at econometric values for coming into Vernon as opposed to going someplace else. So I would encourage a citywide, chamber-wide, stakeholder-wide enterprise to be able to get more than 100 responses. You need thousands of responses. You need to be able to take in my opinion, you need to be able to take the answers and have a very robust economic understanding of what the marketplace is and what they're looking for, because this is a 25 to 30-year project. It's not just now. I think stakeholders are going to want to know, whether they can turn the light on, the switch is going to go on. But from the perspective of investment, from the perspective of long-term stakeholder growth in Vernon, you're going to have to go much wider than the 1,200 or however many people, the several hundred that live here, and the 500-600 businesses that are actively engaged. That would be my recommendation.
Chair, if I could just remind you, this section is for questions before we take public comment, and then we'll have comments after.
That was a question. How are you going to do that?
Commissioner, that's part of our plan to distribute the information through Business Industry Commission, as well as the Chamber, as well as the Vernon Green Commission, and publicize it as much as possible because we want input from the community. And like you mentioned, from the community that's hoping to get into Vernon as well and what they're looking for. We want to be competitive and we want to be a good utility that serves up customers. So we are looking for that.
Thank you.
I got a real quick question. On your renewable and the requirements and resources, I look at the chart you put out there. Are those numbers, and we're going down 22 years up to 45, and I probably won't be around there, so I won't know the real answer because I won't be here. But those green lines and yellow lines, are those projections pretty right on? Are we close, or just an estimate at that point?
Commissioner, in the past, the IRP has been only required to be done for 10 years. Recently, the updated requirement was to go all the way up to 2045, where they are hoping to go 100% renewable. So the green lines you see is what we currently own as renewable resources that are going to go all the way up to 2045. So we need to procure or go to the market or sign some new projects to meet that goal. But it's the red line, which we are assuming as a load, is an estimate. We really don't know. There's not a lot of data out there to go all the way beyond 10 years or so. So it's a best guess estimate right now.
Thank you.
I have a question. Now, this policy and regulation, compliance that we are, doing as, part of the survey, how much in line is it with other, utilities like, Southern California Edison or LEDWP, are we in line with that, or are we doing something like, different from them?
Commissioner, all IOUs, those are investor-owned utilities, are also have to comply with these regulations. And they have been buying resources. There is a very, resources are very competitive right now, and that's pushing the prices of renewable resources due to the fact that all big utilities have to comply with the same regulations. And it's driving the renewable market prices up.
Which leads to my question. I realize the state has set these very aggressive renewable goals. I will address the fact that I think it's ridiculous that hydro is not considered green energy, and I would even argue nat gas is green energy. However, we're not in the state legislature. But if the only plan is solar and perhaps a small amount of biomass, I fail to see how you're going to bridge that gap, particularly in any kind of competitive price point to the businesses that make up Vernon, and it's kind of an oxymoron to the mission statement here to have lowest energy rates by 2030. So is the IRP going to address the cost gap, which is clearly going to happen to achieve the goals?
Commissioner, we are very aware of the fact that reliability and low rates are like a requirement for our city. But saying that we have to meet the regulations, and we are very careful in what types of projects that we get into. In the past, we have been able to, through our JPA with other cities, we have been able to get economy of scale by getting into these projects. The last projects we signed are very competitive. But in the future, we're not sure what we are going to get. There are other renewables like wind and geothermal, which are a little far more pricier than solar. So we are looking into all that, and the IRP model will provide us the least cost path to get there. When we put all these renewables and the available resources in, that's what the models are supposed to show us. How do you get to that least cost path?
And will it be addressed as with the data that you know now and the cost structure to date in the IRP? Will that information be disclosed?
The IRP will disclose all the information that was put in, and it'll have the cost data as well as the renewables that were considered, the case scenarios was considered. Along with that, the city is supposed to also have a cost of service study in the next year or so. That will take that into consideration, how the IRP planning will correlate to that cost of service.
I have a question for you on how to read this chart. I want to make sure that I'm understanding that the top line, the red line, for retail sales, that's what you're selling to the consumers of Vernon Power, is that correct?
Yes.
So it's pretty flat after 2025. And the gap seems to grow in the yellow line, is that the yellow line? Between what you need to purchase and what you already have, with the renewable requirement getting relatively close to what you're selling. Am I reading this right?
Commissioner, you are. So basically, at this time, our renewable requirement is only 39% of retail sales. Now, end of 2023, we are supposed to be at 40%. But in 2045, we are supposed to be 100% renewable of our retail sales. That's the regulations or the requirement.
So if you're, I guess my question is, if you're unable to procure additional power, does that mean you're not going to be able to produce power for the consumers that are here? So you're going to have to drop down your sales number to, it's going to dip at a certain point because you can't produce power, because you can't get the renewable resources that you need to generate the power that the consumers need? Am I reading this right?
Commissioner, just to clarify, the chart, if we cannot procure an energy resource to generate ourselves, what it will do is we'll go to the market and buy that energy. So there won't be a shortfall of energy. We'll always either go procure it from the market, or we'll use one of our generating resources to fulfill the.
And you'll buy renewable energy from someone else? Who would that be?
So part of the requirement is for the California ISO grid, which is a one grid throughout the state. Will also has to be at these regulations. So the entire grid will have to move along with the requirements. So today, the grid can be assumed to be 39% green. In 2030, the grid should be 60% renewable in terms of energy when you procure it from the market.
Okay, I understand that. And if it's not, then what?
If it's not, we would have to go procure renewable energy on our own.
Okay, but let's say there's, I hate to belabor the point, but I just have to get it in my mind's eye. If the renewable resources can't produce enough, then what?
There are few different options in renewables, like geothermal. It's considered a base load. It produces 24/7. Battery is a backup storage. So for that particular reason, when you buy a PV project, most utilities pair it with a battery. Now we have 4-hour batteries, 8-hour batteries, and 12-hour batteries. They all cost money, but they all are available. You can do carbon capture, and then you also have hydrogen that can be pumped into the plants at a fuel mix.
Okay.
All those are options that are available. Some of them are in early stages. Others are coming along faster than we anticipate.
Okay, thank you.
One more question from me. For 2023 this year, or you can look at last year, 2022, the green bar up on the slide. The green bar is not renewable. It's your total, it's the current total mix, correct?
Commissioner, the green bar is our total renewable for that.
Total renewable. So you're not including the current hydro or the current nat gas portion?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
When you calculate the renewable in the city of Vernon, if you have a building owner that owns a 200,000 square foot building and he's put solar panels on his roof, does that go into the city of Vernon's calculations to help you get to that level of where the state requires?
Commissioner, there is a component that we can calculate that, but the reason why we can include that is that we have to procure capacity just in case those they have a dip as a cloudy day and there's a dip, or it doesn't put out enough as much as, so we still have to go procure the energy and be on standby. And that's a double cost for the utility, and that, so we feel like we would rather procure the RECs in that we use the brown power and procure something called the RECs to satisfy that requirement.
And so does it somehow, obviously Vernon manufactures their own power. It's a source of revenue for the city. So does the solar in general, you answered my question, thank you. This is a second question. Is there a natural conflict at all between the city and having the users within the city have solar? Are there any limitations that the city puts on percentage of roofs for solar, et cetera? I'm just wondering if there's,
I'll have to defer that to Mr. Serrano.
So currently, it's part of the NIM metering. So all our customers that are allowed solar can only go up to their max KW. So you're basically just offsetting what you're using, 100%.
right, okay. So if they have extra, Anthony, they can't
they can't
sell it.
overproduce based on the NIM.
Got it. Thank you.
I have another question. The nat gas portion currently and the hydro from Hoover Dam and the nuclear portion, does the city of Vernon have any contracts that on those areas that extend out past 2030? Or are they all expiring prior to 2030?
I will have to go review the contracts, but most of our projects are beyond 2030 at this time.
So if we can't use that power though because of the state regulation, you'll have to offset that with additional renewable. And s-
Commissioner,
yeah.
sorry. In 2030, we're supposed to be at 60%.
60%, right.
So we do have, with the purchase of MGS, which helped us change our generating profile. So Hoover at this time is producing far less than its capacity. The nuclear power plant, Palo Verde, is a small portion of our portfolio. And even though you see the capacities of this green energy, the energy itself is far less when they produce. Their capability, they can, on a great day, if everything works fine, they might be able to get to 95% of that PV capacity, but they generally don't. They have a profile that they reduce and they don't produce as much. So, and also these solar and PV projects do not provide evening time energy for us. So when you take all that into consideration, we don't see how those are going to get reduced, taken out of the portfolio.
No, I'm not, that's not where I'm going. I'm going, you have to go the other way, because already the green portfolio is 48% of this chart. So you already have a shortfall, and then that's going to grow past 2030. So if you already have contracts extending on non-renewable past 2030, obviously somebody's going to calculate the mix, but it might be problematic.
The PV projects, even though the capacity is displayed here, which is, for instance, example I can give you is if you take Daggett, which is 60 megawatts, we need 3 times as much in terms of comparing it to a MGS. With MGS puts out 30 megawatts, we need 90 megawatts of PV to be comparable. Therefore, those assets are going to remain up until beyond 2030 in our opinion, but that's will be part of the IRP calculation. How much will they emit? Could we still keep these resources going and still comply with the IRP regulations and fall under the renewable procurement mandate? All that is going to be taken into consideration in this IRP.
Right. I mean, I just mean because your pie chart's not really correct in terms of the quantity.
Take that and we'll work on that. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
Quick question for you, Mr. Sorry, your name was
Ralph Dean.
Ralph Lean. You did mention that the generating station is your workhorse. Maybe the question is a little premature, but what is the plans for the generating station as it ages? Is it repurposed or decommissioned, or do you know at this point?
We have few options. Like you said, MGS is an important asset. It's one of our biggest resources. Like I said, it's 70%. It could cover 70% of our load in case of an emergency. It's an important asset, and we have a few plans for it that will be put out in this IRP case studies. One is to convert it to a peaker. One is to do a hydrogen blend for its. It has capabilities to have a blend, early blend. Maybe there'll be advances in that type. We can also overhaul the engines and get new engines in there for that, and also pair it with a battery. Those are kind of the options that we have contemplating and discussing internally.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions? Are there any public comments?
There are none on Zoom.
Since there are no public comments, we will now go to the oral reports.
I don't believe there are any reports from staff. If the commissioners had any comments or directives, this would be the appropriate time.
Does it have to be on the agenda items only, or it could be about anything?
It should be specific to the commission's responsibilities, but
Okay.
it could be. It doesn't have to be an agenda item.
I have a suggestion. I would like to maybe, I think it would be a good idea to, for the commission to hear about, crime stats, numbers. I think we would like to know if, the crime in the city, how is it? Is it, going up, down? I think it also helps with the, investors as well as, new, businesses coming in to know how safe the city is. So I think that should maybe, become a, regular, brief, report.
I know they do have a city hall meeting with the mayor about those statistics. Is that correct?
The police department does a monthly report, which is on the council's agenda, as well as the fire department.
Yes.
We can relay that information to staff and bring it back at your next meeting if you'd like, or make sure you get those reports sent to you.
Please, thank you.
I have a question. Is there a separate utilities commission, or is the BIC and/or Green Commission cover utilities?
There is not a separate utilities commission.
So is it really BIC, or is it green, or both? Because we're going renewable.
I think that the utilities department has thought of both of those bodies being involved, which is why you're having this joint meeting.
Right, okay, thank you.
Are there any reports from the commissioners or staff? With no further business, I adjourn the Joint Special Business and Industry Commission and Green Vernon Commission meeting at 4:13 and reconvene the March 15, 2023 Special Business and Industry Commission meeting. We'll pause for a brief moment to allow the Green Vernon commissioners to leave the dais.
Yeah.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
We will now go to presentations.
Just to clarify, we are reconvening the Special Business and Industry Commission meeting, and we are on item number 1, Sales and Property Tax Revenue Update. Finance Director Williams will present the report.
That Williams.
Yes. This way. Good afternoon, Honorable Chair and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to present to the Commission an update of 2 of the city's major revenue sources, sales and property taxes. With this update, we will be covering a general economic update with cost drivers and what we have observed over the last 3 years, as well as our outlook for this upcoming year. We will take a look at a trend of business and consumer activity within the city. From there, we will take a look specifically at Vernon's sales tax base, what is generated locally, the sales tax mix, and from there, we will finish up with our property tax base. Okay, in terms of economic performance and outlook, so this time every year we are well into the process of beginning our financial planning or the fiscal year budget for the upcoming year. And many years ago in this process, it was rather routine where we would look at the previous year and then you would add a reasonable percentage inflator of some sort or deflator depending on the economy. Now, just as our local businesses experience, we are in a much more complex environment where we actually have to begin this process of financial planning by looking globally. And the reason for that is because, as we know, what occurs in one advanced economy really spills over into the next. That's a very connected world that we live in. And this is especially true in the financial markets as well as the banking industry, but also in commodities like natural gas. So that's where we begin. And from there, we look regionally, county and greater Los Angeles area, as this is an economic engine that is impacting all of that. And then finally, we look locally at our own local economy and revenue sources. And this is what we see. So you see a couple here on the slide. So although inflation peaked this last summer, in terms of the headline number, it has still continued on a month-over-month basis. In other words, each month we see a decreasing percentage of inflation, and that's moving the right direction, of course. It does represent progress, but it is still only a reduction in the rate of increase. In other words, prices are still continuing to rise, but at a slower pace than before. Drivers for this are strong employment, which on the one hand, we can be happy about. I mean, with full employment, how can we be concerned with that? But on the other, this has created an upward spiral of wages that I'm sure all business owners are experiencing that continue to drive costs for services and finished products. And then while many of the supply chain issues have improved, in some cases resolved, but certainly improved, these constraints continue to be a problem and drive costs. So our outlook for this upcoming year, as we plan the next 12 months beginning in July. This is a point of, this is somewhat of a point of debate as to which direction it's going to go. It's difficult to see how the Federal Reserve has any other path besides higher rates for longer, because their number one task is price control. Even if interest rates, even if the increases stop, it's difficult to see how this is going to retreat. Now, I mentioned the capital or the financial markets. It's interesting. We mentioned there a soft landing versus a recession. Now, I'm sure you've observed the news in the last 3 business days, beginning last week, with one bank after another. And the bond market, it's astonishing. And they are already pricing in, they're overreacting as normal, and they're pricing in what looks like a more than 100 basis point decrease by next January. To accomplish that, there would have to be significant negative impacts to the economy. And this is what we're trying to figure out. How do we plan in this context? The next FOMC meeting is 1 week from today. So that will be very interesting to look at those notes and see what happens. So in conclusion of this phase of planning, it's marked by uncertainty, and caution is required in our financial planning. Oops, I went one too many. Consumer sentiment. Oh, it looks like I have a slide missing. Well, let me just, I have a slide missing, but in terms of consumer sentiment, just a couple of notes on this that's related to this slide. So these are measurements that they represent, on the one hand, continued economic activity, but on the other, both direct and indirect drivers for inflation that we're just discussing. So it looked like consumer sentiment was declining last year, probably in correlation to a very negative capital market. It looks like it bottomed and has and kind of began to rebound several months ago. Well, that represents further spending. We also look at the personal consumer expenditures, the PCE. That's one of the Fed's favorite measurements. Again, what we are seeing is that it is remaining stubbornly high. It's almost stuck, and it actually increased last month at the last measure. So the next one is at the end of this month. And that's a measure. It's one of their favorite measures because it really measures where the consumer behavior, not just their sentiment, what things are really costing the average person. The conclusion to that is the consumer is still absorbing increased costs. We're seeing this over this phenomenon over the last couple of years. There was every expectation that depleted savings or this kind of cap out and get tired of that. But thus far, the consumer has continued to absorb costs, and that is certainly a driver to inflation. So some of what we see, just think, for instance, the cost of fuel. Now, cost of fuel has gone down, but when it was escalating, people might drive less, but because the costs were higher, we're seeing more sales tax as a result of that. So it will be very interesting to see how that plays out and Federal Reserve activity. So this brings us locally with sales tax. And the first step is this pie represents all of the sales tax generated in City of Vernon. So the tax generated is collected by the state, the CDTFA, on behalf of the city, and it's dispersed to all of the different agencies, including the state. So the statewide sales tax, before any local additional taxes, at the county level, is 7.25. And this is excluding the Measure V add-on tax. So the city is allocated 1% per Bradley Burns tax law. And as you can see, the result is out of nearly 99 million that is generated each year, the city receives, it's 1%, which is approximately 8.2 million. So the city is funding a lot of activity outside the city, including a couple of measures that are sales tax based, that produce funding for streets, where we get a very, very minimal. It's about 25,000 that the city receives for streets. A breakdown of the product mix, sales tax by category. So the stacked bars represent total sales tax, and you see several quarters there. So there's several very important categories to the city of Vernon. There's general retail, and these are broad categories that the sales tax analytics, these are their standards for reporting. So there's general retail, construction, business-to-business activity, and the county pool. So the county pool is the city's share of internet sales. And it's just based on, so as our sales tax, as that pie on the previous graph increases, the city's share does as well. And so as you can see on previous quarters, that the bottom light blue, it has actually increased in several quarters. But these categories, and there's a lot aggregated in miscellaneous, but B2B, general retail, and construction are very important activity to the city. They are transaction based, but mostly sales to other businesses. Next, sales tax forecast. So as you can see, it is certainly on the increase. This is our fastest growing revenue category, and it is increasing, but the bars, relative to costs, so we can be happy about the trend, but it is fairly flat. And as we mentioned at the beginning of the discussion, especially over the next couple of years, we're talking just a little over $1 million there, an estimate. And I mean, that's almost flat on a year-over-year basis. So we are exercising caution. This certainly could change based on economic development in the out years, but we're not going to build that into our computations just yet. And we use we use an outside firm for our analytics just based on what we know today. That's the exercise of caution. Switching to property tax. Now, while property tax represents a fairly small amount on its own, we are what's known as a low property tax city. That's not a technical term, but that is the reality of it. It is the most stable of tax revenues. So, but again, as you can see, out of all that is, this is based on assessed value, the city receives just 7%. So property tax is 1% of the AV for that tax year, and then it's divided up between all of these different outside agencies that you see, and that is really not subject to change ever, this allocation, because it would mean that all of them have to agree to give us more, and that's not going to happen. So we are right at 7%, which is 2.6 million, but we produce an awful lot for outside agencies. Our forecast, again, it's positive, but also it's quite modest. So it is, it's moving directionally the right way, but there's only so much the tax increment is going to increase, and that's per the assessor each fiscal year. So, in conclusion, these two significant revenues are sources are tracking and forecasted to be positive. As noted at the beginning of the discussion, the city is exercising caution in our outlook and carefully monitoring all of the leading indicators as we put together our forecast. Everything pivots from available resources when we put our financial plan together each year. So we think caution is the best course of action. And it's also worth noting, we mentioned our reserves, that in our planning for uncertainties, the city is vigilant to protect the reserves that are in place. And this is what they're there for, the uncertainties of at least the next year or two. So that concludes this overview, and we are available for any questions or comments or direction.
Scott, the 7% share that you get from the basic 1% property tax, that does not, does that include the parcel tax for warehousing and the safety tax for manufacturing?
No, those are completely separate, and I left that out of the mix because it's not based on assessed value. This is when you see the assessed value. I believe it's approximately $6 billion, and it continues to improve. The values are great here in the city, but those are treated separate. Those are transactional.
And could you give an estimate as to what the actual revenue was, let's say for 21 or 2022, with those two combined taxes, which come on the property tax bill but are different? But
let me see if staff has that off the top of their head.
12 million for the parcel tax?
Yeah, the safety tax is 2 million, that's correct, but approximately 12 million, and we'll get that precise. We certainly can send an email to all the commissioners.
So just to be clear, with with all the property tax that the county assesses, we only get 7% of the 1%.
That's correct.
Wow.
And by comparison, nearby city, it's in the 20s, the mid 20s. Yeah, so that was part of the impetus years ago for these additional taxes, because when you think of a typical residential city, they are very rarely there's only a few of these cities, especially here in the Gateway, that are low, but there are a few of them, and this is a very stable tax that's generally used for core services, public safety, and infrastructure. That's the basis for a city of why a business owner would ever want to plant roots there, not to mention a resident. So for many years it was quite stable, and there's only one time, I would say, in all of our history that this actually retreated, and that was in the great crash of 2008, and let's hope for not another one of those. But and we don't expect that, but that was quite rare. But consequently, as a result of this, this is never going to change. This 7% of the 1% versus other cities that are in the mid-20s, just right nearby.
I mean, I would comment just on from an industrial real estate standpoint. Land values across the board with the interest rate increase have dipped in the last 6 months by, minimum 25%, but on up to 50%. But then you have to remember that during the pandemic or after the pandemic, they doubled in a period of about 18 months. So there's a lot of room for them to go back down. But I can tell you that the vacancy rate in the city of Vernon is growing. During the pandemic, you put a building on the market, you'd have 7 offers to lease a building. And today, maybe you get 1, 2, or 3, or none, and buildings are starting to sit vacant, which we haven't had happen in years. No vacancy. You know, the 118 on Soto Street that electric company was occupying, Pop Chronopoulos just expanded into that building, which was good, coming off of Slauson. But overall, every day, we're seeing more and more inventory come on the market, which is just going to be, you know, it's going to be less revenue for the city, and buildings are going to be sitting vacant. They're not getting the parcel tax and selling power. It's changing.
Yes, and that's an interesting indicator, because there's no data set out there outside of actual anecdote and a personal observation for us to know that. And that's why we're conservative in our estimates. We have to be. But I do think I think that is a leading indicator. I think that it's we've heard the Fed say that the price normalization isn't going to happen without pain. And so we're going to see, there's just no two ways about it. We can't have a correction to inflation without a slowing economy. But this is, I mentioned there at the end, this is why reserves are in place, and this is why a cautious approach. Put those two together and we will weather this. But there is going to be an impact, and that's a delayed impact that you're describing. We won't see that until the next fiscal year. So by then, things might be looking great, but we have to build this into our computation. And again, it's when we're entering a slowdown, it's really for 2 full years that we have to take these things into consideration. What happened in the pandemic is such an anomaly. We've never seen anything change that fast, to the good or bad, in history, ever. And so we try to leave that out, but now everything is just kind of flipped in terms of expectations.
Yeah, I think it's going to take months to see what the true effect is happening with the interest rate change. And, you know, obviously the capital markets are upside down, but there's going to be, it's going to take months. So we might not really see this until what's happening in Vernon until 2024. It's going to be slow.
I would agree with that. This cost of borrowing, it already on the residential, and again, what happens nationally is not necessarily Vernon. We're distinct, but nationally, the activity in real estate has just come to a screeching halt. I mean, I forget the last figure on residential mortgages, but at these very elevated values, you're talking about of the interest portion of a mortgage, they doubled over this last year. It is very significant. And then think of all of the different businesses related to that. Everything related to building materials, construction, inspections, the sales activity, everything related to developers, and on the sales side and on the lending side. It's strange that the economy is as strong as it is, given that it has literally come to a screeching halt at least 6 months ago, maybe longer. I'm citing that to underscore your point that these things are delayed and we don't know the full, and there's always the danger of the Federal Reserve overreacting. But the problem is they keep raising rates, and everything that you just saw and everything that we just talked about, the mighty consumer just keeps spending. I don't know where it's coming from, but they just keep spending, and it's driving inflation. So it's a conundrum, but these things will never be resolved until some pain sets in, and it's I mean it's something we all have to plan for on a go-forward basis.
I have a question. What are the reserves, either in dollar amount or percent? And are you planning on increasing the reserves over the next 2 years?
It would be difficult to increase the reserves. Just we may actually have to tap them over the next couple of years. So in the general fund, 30, 24, 23, It's approximately 23 million in the general fund. Now that's relative to budget of around 70 million, 65, 70 million. The cash reserves in Enlightened Power, it's in excess of the policy of 180 days. So they're significant, but they're not limitless. So it would be great to add to them over the next couple of years. Maybe in the second year, I think this coming year, it may be time to use some of those reserves for one-time, try to limit them to one-time costs. In other words, don't pay for ongoing living expenses, what it costs to operate the city, but those one-time things that need to occur in terms of capital or vehicle replacement and things like that.
I had one question regarding how is the street maintenance, the share of the street maintenance for road repair, how is that determined? Because I'm pretty sure 23,000 doesn't cover.
Yeah, there's actually recently been an assessment, and oh, you mean I'm sorry, I was the plan versus. Sorry about that. So yes, it's based on population. Yeah, that's the grant revenue that's given, or the streets revenue that we're mentioning in part is generated from sales tax, and that's why we showed that the distribution of how disproportionate this is,
Yes.
and why we have to take such. I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. I was thinking the actual capital plan. That is different.
Thank you.
If you can go to this slide here, annual sales tax by category. The third quarter of 2022, the general retail sales tax category, that's shrunk by quite a bit. Why is that?
So we had a major producer change their jurisdiction. So they were in two different jurisdictions, and it's based on the function of their operations. And we actually were able to recover 50% of those through a sales tax sharing agreement. And that was the agreement with Santa Fe Springs.
And
But it also does represent declining activity. These are retail sales, not exclusively, but at least in one case, internet-based sales. So you're seeing some activity there that is changing.
Yeah, and that brings me to the county pool, and I think that was the internet sales, the light blue category.
Oh, the county pool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's based on your total. So that's going to decrease as our total share decreases. So whatever is shared to us from a sales tax agreement isn't going to go toward the whole. So that's going to be impacted based on the total proportionately.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have any other questions for staff? Are there any public comments?
There are no raised hands on Zoom.
Do we have any public comments here?
I have a comment. I know the future is going to be challenging for you guys, but anything we could do to help you see the positives and maybe come up with the best solution for the city, we're here to support you. Well, I am.
There actually is an opportunity, and it's an interesting one, and it's not one that has a perfectly cut and dried solution to it. But one of the components of both our sales and property tax, when a company purchases major fixed equipment, they refer to them as fixtures. They're not part of the assessed value. That actually benefits the city, but there's two ways that it can benefit the city. It will happen on the property tax side because the assessor recognizes it, and anything over $100,000 must be reported. But it's when they are purchased, and there's various avenues And this would be a more detailed, almost workshop discussion, or we could, meet with city admin to discuss the particulars of this. But it's so that we capture the sales tax. There's various mechanisms for doing this, but it's making the point of sale within our borders. So this is a very big deal. When a company purchases, you go figure it's 1,000 per million, and they replace vehicles or equipment or anything of that nature, that can be captured just by directing the point of sale within our borders. Now, there's some cases where that can't happen if it was shipped from California to here, but there's a lot of cases where it can. And it just takes a little bit of cooperation. But this is something, this has been a point of interest and discussion of how to go about this, and the city is willing to offer any measure of support to our local businesses, because our businesses are who are going to directly benefit from this. This funds services that are provided by the city on behalf of our businesses. So it's a great opportunity. It's unknown how much that will result in, but that's a very tangible way.
And at this point, manufacturers that buy $1 million piece of equipment, a lot of them don't know that they could help the city just by making sure this is the point of sale?
And I think that's for starters, yes. Most of them, I would guess, don't know that is a possibility. But it's every sale doesn't function the same. Some order something from outside the country, and then it becomes in the form of a use tax. That may or may not be captured, and it's difficult to measure. But I would say it would begin with this message to businesses that this is this cooperative relationship, and we are willing to do any or all of the work necessary to make it happen. The businesses will benefit. It's revenue that's being left on the table because it's going elsewhere. Buy something in California, it's going to get taxed. Let's capture it for the city of Vernon. And thank you for asking.
I think when I say, I think we say from all of us, we, the, commission are here to, support the city, and, yeah.
Excellent.
We will now go to the consent calendar. All matters listed on the consent calendar may be approved with one motion. Items may be removed from the consent calendar by any member of the commission. Those items removed will be considered immediately after the consent calendar. Does the commission wish to pull the item from the consent calendar? Are there any public comments for the consent calendar? May I have a motion for consent calendar item number 2? Thomas Condon. And is there a second?
I second.
Motion by Commissioner Condon, seconded by Commissioner Brown to approve the consent calendar, which consists of the meeting minutes of July 14th. I'll call the roll. Let's see. Chair Saktava?
Aye.
Vice Chair Morfin?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Condon?
Yes.
Commissioner Williams?
Yes.
Motion carries.
We will now go to new business.
Item number 3 is general fee schedule update for fiscal year 2023-24, and Finance Director Williams will present the item.
So each year we present to the commission the general fee schedule update for the upcoming fiscal year, and this is especially notable as we discussed that in our preparation for the upcoming fiscal year budget, there really are no changes, so this is just a recommendation to receive and file. But we do want to mention take this moment to mention future activity. So by way of reminder, 2 years ago, that every few years as a best practice, we bring in an outside firm to do an overall cost allocation fee study and come up with a cost allocation model to really assess. It's everything from the overhead cost to time motion so that we can accurately assess fees. Right now, the city is subsidizing an awful lot, meaning a considerably disproportionate amount. And fees versus taxes, you remember a fee is associated with a specific activity to a specific entity. In other words, a sidewalk, which is paid for through a general tax, anyone, it's public thoroughfare, anyone can walk on it regardless of whether they paid into that tax. A fee for an inspection is a one-for-one relationship, and so the goal of a fee is to recover costs, and that only, not turn a profit. And so 2 years ago, we completed a cost allocation fee study. We brought the results forward, but it was 2020. It was in the middle of the pandemic, and so there was a lot of discussion about what our path forward. Because at that time it was above $1 million. I want to say approximately $1.5 million per year that the city is subsidizing, primarily public works, and all of the activity in that department, as well as our health department, for activity very specifically related to business requests. It was tabled, and the pandemic dragged on, and really it had gone long enough that we now need a new study. So we have begun the process, the finance department has begun the process for an RFP to acquire an outside firm. We're going to be doing another study, and it will come to the commission first when we have the findings and the output of that study, just to take a look. And it should be noted too that when this assessment is complete and brought forward, it isn't required that it's 100. There's a lot of different ways to go about it. I have observed in the past that it could be phased in over a period of years, especially if some of them are considerably behind. But there's another point worth noting, and that is that in some cases we look at activity and fees could actually be reduced. And I realize that's going to be fewer than those that will be increased, but in some cases that is the purpose. We're trying to look at activity in a fair and equitable manner that will stand up under scrutiny and that's performed by an outside agency, and that is the capture of those costs. So that will be being brought forward in the coming months. I would say 2 meetings out at least before that's brought forward to the commission.
Does the commission have any questions for staff? Are there any public comments?
There are no raised hands on Zoom.
May I have a motion?
A motion?
Is there a second?
Motion by Vice Chair Morfin, seconded by Commissioner Condon, to receive and file the proposed general fee schedule. Chair Saktava,
Aye.
Vice Chair Morfin,
Aye.
Commissioner Brown,
Aye.
Commissioner Condon,
Yes.
Commissioner Williams. Motion carries.
Is there any discussion from the commission? None? Okay. We will now go to oral reports.
Staff does not have any reports.
Are there any reports from the commission or staff? No. With no further business, I adjourn the Special Business and Industry Commission meeting at 4:55, March 15.